Imagine your spouse throws you out of your own house, in front of the whole neighborhood, and thinks the story ends right there. But what she doesn't know is, the real game is just beginning. Stay until the end. This one takes a turn you won't see coming. Hope you enjoy it. Corinne slapped the divorce papers onto the porch boards like she was tossing down a gauntlet, and the sound cracked through the quiet street. I stood there in my work shirt, coffee going cold in my hand, while every last leaf in New Canaan looked like it had gone still. My name is Merritt Cole. I was 40 years old then. I lived on a neat little street in New Canaan, Connecticut, where people raked like it was a religion. It was a Thursday in late October, around lunchtime, and the neighbors were out doing their quiet, perfect yard routines like they were paid to be tasteful. Corinne stepped out barefoot in a nice wool coat, hair done, chin up. She didn't look at me first. She looked past me, toward the sidewalk, like the audience mattered more than the man she'd married. "You've got 2 days to get out," she said, slow and clear. "Blaine's moving in. He's the man of this house now." She wasn't even whispering. She aimed her voice at the street, not at my face. It wasn't a real deadline, just theater meant to land in other people's ears and turn into law by gossip. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. Dottie Klein was right there with her little dog pretending she was fixing the leash. Across the street, the Winslows paused mid-project in their open garage, hands frozen on a toolbox. Corinne loved that. She loved being seen. I bent down and picked up the papers like they might tear. My hands didn't shake. I made sure Dottie saw that. I gave the Winslows a quick glance, too. Witnesses worked both ways. Corinne took my calm like surrender. She tapped the top page with one finger. "The moving truck is scheduled for Saturday morning," she added, like she had a calendar that controlled my life. Blaine wasn't there yet, but his shadow was. Guys like him sent the confident partner out first, the one who craved attention, so the target looked small in front of the neighborhood. Corinne played her part perfectly. I smiled, just a little. Not because I was weak, because for 9 weeks I'd watched her and Blaine play grown-up with paperwork they didn't understand. She thought loud words beat signatures. She narrowed her eyes at my smile. "Don't take anything that isn't yours," she said louder, like she wanted the line to stick to me, like she was daring me to look guilty. "Got it," I said, and kept my voice even. She turned and walked back inside without checking my face, the door shutting soft behind her like she'd already won. I stood there on the porch with the papers in my hand, listening to Dottie's dog snuffle at the edge of my steps, and I felt my jaw lock into place. I tucked the papers under my arm, stepped off the porch, and walked straight to my car. I slid into my car and shut the door, but I didn't start the engine. Through the windshield, I could still see my front porch, my house, my life posed like a catalog shot. From the curb, Corinne and I looked solid. Almost 12 years married, charity galas for her, corporate dinners for me, and that colonial everyone assumed we built together from scratch. I worked as a compliance director for a big insurance group in Stamford. Nothing flashy, nothing sexy, but I lived in rules, timelines, signatures, and consequences. I understood how small mistakes turned into big investigations. Corinne used to laugh about it. "You could ruin a picnic with a checklist," she'd say at parties, smiling like it was adorable. People would laugh. I'd smile too, because that was the role. The steady husband, the careful one. Corinne lived in a different world. She raised money for art foundations, which meant galas, donors, auction paddles, and endless conversations with friends of friends who cared more about seating charts than truth. She didn't love lying outright, but she loved appearances enough to rent the lie when she needed it. The house was her crown jewel. Good street, good schools, trimmed hedges, clean lines. She talked about it like it was proof we were winning at life, like the street itself kept score and she planned to stay ahead. The first crack wasn't Blaine. It was her tone, shifting in public. At dinners, she'd correct me over tiny details that didn't matter. At a fundraiser, she told a couple from Darien, "Merritt is working on loosening up. He needs coaching." She squeezed my arm when she said it, smiling wide for them. I didn't react. I stored it. Then Blaine showed up through her charity circuit. She introduced him one night after an event in Westport. "This is Blaine," she said. "He's a breathwork mentor and personal strategist." He shook my hand like he was sealing a deal. He talked in polished paragraphs, like every sentence had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. He looked like a man who had never carried a couch upstairs or fixed a leaking sink in his life. A week later, Corinne started dropping new phrases at breakfast. "We're launching an initiative," she said one morning, scrolling her phone. Another day it was. A foundation would look incredible to donors. I thought it was another storyline she was chasing. I didn't realize she meant it literally. She said Blaine was helping her expand. Then it became him helping her see what she deserved. Eventually, she told me she was done settling for a husband who reads the fine print instead of dreaming big. That line stuck. I started noticing the money language. Not big withdrawals, nothing dramatic. Just invoices with vague labels, payments broken into neat, forgettable chunks, the kind of entries that try to look normal on a statement. My mother, Nadine Mercer, had done forensic audits for courts for years. She raised me alone and drilled one rule into me early. If something feels off, don't argue about it. Collect. Sitting in my car that Thursday, papers on the passenger seat, I realized the porch scene didn't come out of nowhere. Corinne never wanted a quiet ending. She wanted a public win, with me framed as the man who got replaced. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, already making a list in my head. As I drove toward the Merritt Parkway, I didn't feel rage. I felt focus. I hadn't started collecting evidence because I wanted revenge. I started because the spending didn't match the stories, and I'd seen what "just trust me" turned into when regulators showed up with subpoenas. That shift had happened about 9 weeks earlier. One Tuesday night, while Corinne was upstairs on a video call with Blaine, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and pulled our bank activity. I built a simple spreadsheet. Date, amount, description, what Corinne said it was. No drama, no commentary. Plain is what holds up later. The first odd charge was labeled Sutter's Strategy. A few days later, it was B. Sutter Consulting. Then one that actually made me laugh out loud. Alignment Partners. The name sounded expensive but thin. I checked the state registry during my lunch break the next day. None of them were structured the way real businesses protect themselves. No clean filings. No consistent footprint. Corinne was busy performing her new life. She was posting filtered photos about growth and clarity, tagging Blaine in captions that sounded like quotes from a conference stage. She didn't notice that every time an invoice hit our shared email, I screenshotted it within minutes and backed it up to a private drive she didn't know existed. I tracked patterns the lazy way. I followed Blaine's public posts, his geotags, those short inspirational reels where he talked about alignment while reflections in windows gave away street signs. Guys like him couldn't resist documenting themselves. They needed the applause too much. I also did what my mother used to call reading the blanks. When Blaine went quiet online for a few days, money moved. When he posted something big about transformation, money moved again. It had rhythm, like a heartbeat you could set a clock to. Over time, I saw the rotation. He didn't just recycle lines with Corinne. He rotated clients the same way. One woman got healing. A business owner got clarity. Someone else got discretion. Same promises, different packaging. The house was where Corinne got bold. She'd started saying things like, "When this is mine outright, I'm repainting the study." She spoke as if I were a temporary guest she'd tolerated for years. She had no idea the deed wasn't the full story. Years earlier, my mother had insisted I buy the property through a family trust structure. I did it because she said clean lines prevent messy endings. Corinne signed what she was told at closing and never asked a single question about the structure. She trusted the vibe of security more than the paperwork behind it. By the time she stepped onto that porch with her little performance, I already had a timeline mapped out. I had every invoice saved, every post archived, and a short list of names Blaine bragged about online like trophies. When I reached the office parking lot that Thursday, I didn't sit in the car. I grabbed my laptop bag, stepped out, and walked straight toward the building doors. Instead of going straight into the office, I stayed in the parking lot with the engine off and my laptop open on the passenger seat. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady. That steady feeling told me it was time to move. I pulled up Blaine's website and clicked on his testimonials page like I was ordering from a menu. He had posted real names, full names, paired with glowing quotes about transformation and clarity. That was his first big mistake. Confidence makes people sloppy. 4 names stood out immediately: Tamsin Voss, Keely Marrow, Dr. Leora Penn, Eamon Chow. They sounded established, the kind of people who had reputations to protect and clients who trusted them. Successful, careful, the kind who would hate being played. I didn't know any of them personally, but I knew the type. I dealt with enough executives and attorneys to recognize that mix of pride and quiet panic when something smells wrong. I drafted one message and customized it slightly for each. I believe you and I may have paid the same person for similar services. I'm not selling anything. I'm not asking for money. I just want to compare facts and protect ourselves. I didn't attach a single document. People don't open attachments from strangers. Instead, I offered one proof point to each of them. One date, one invoice label, one location tag pulled from Blaine's own social posts. Just enough to show I wasn't guessing. Then I hit send. Tamsin replied first, less than an hour later. Her message was tight and controlled. I'm a divorce attorney, she wrote. I've been helping Blaine through what he described as a messy situation. What exactly are you alleging? She didn't sound scared. She sounded irritated, like someone who realized she might have been cast in the wrong role. Under the careful wording, I could hear anger. Keeley responded next. She owned interior design showrooms in Connecticut and New York. Her reply was shorter. He pitched me a couple's brand partnership tied to charity work. How bad is it? That question told me everything. She already suspected it wasn't clean. Dr. Leora Penn stayed clinical from the start. She wrote that she ran clinical programs in nutraceuticals and that Blaine had claimed access to proprietary protocols and industry contacts. She asked one direct question. Has he used my name publicly without authorization? Eamon's message came last, and it was the calmest of all. He approached me about private placements related to wellness ventures, he wrote. The structure made no sense. What do you have? He didn't sound surprised. He sounded offended, like someone had tried to run a cheap trick in a room where numbers matter. We agreed to a video call that night. Before I confirmed the time, I called my mother. Don't exaggerate, Nadine said. Don't diagnose anyone. Line up facts like bricks. A clean wall is harder to knock down than an emotional speech. I understand, I told her. By dinner time, we had a shared group chat and a secure folder set up. One by one, people started dropping documents in, quietly, carefully. Dates lined up, invoice names matched, travel posts overlapped. For the first time in weeks, the pressure in my chest eased. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't alone. I closed my laptop, stepped out of the car, and walked into the office to finish my day. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the lights low and my laptop open. Corinne was upstairs behind a closed door, probably texting Blaine about her big porch performance. I clicked into the video call, and one by one the others joined. The first 10 minutes were awkward. No one wanted to go first. Successful people don't enjoy admitting they got played. Finally, Tamsin leaned closer to her camera and said, I paid just under $19,000 over 6 months. It was billed as strategy sessions. She paused, then added, he told me to keep it off the record for my own protection. I have the texts. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the heat under it. She wasn't embarrassed. She was angry she'd been managed. Keeley followed. I didn't pay that much, she said. But he used my showroom photos in his case studies. He implied clients he never served. I've archived everything with timestamps. She shared her screen briefly, and I saw side-by-side images. Her professional photos on his polished site with fake captions. That wasn't romance. It was theft, dressed up as branding. Leora adjusted her glasses and spoke like she was presenting at a conference. He never extracted large cash sums from me. Instead, he pushed for introductions, endorsements, and product samples he could resell. He claimed to have protocols and contacts. He does not. Her tone was controlled, but there was a sharp edge there. She hated sloppy risk, and he'd made her look careless. Eamon waited until everyone finished. I wired funds, he said calmly. Not just mine. 2 social contacts invested in what he described as wellness ventures. The structure was vapor. This is a pipeline. The word hung in the air. Pipeline meant system. System meant pattern. We agreed on rules before emotions could take over. No solo threats to Blaine. No angry texts. Everything documented. Anything we didn't witness ourselves labeled clearly as secondhand with a source. Clean language. No exaggeration. Then I told them about the porch scene and the 2-day eviction deadline. Nobody laughed. Keeley just said, he's trying to establish residency. I've seen that tactic before. Tamsin nodded. Coordinated complaints move faster than isolated ones, she said. If we structure this correctly, it's not a bitter spouse. It's a documented pattern. She warned us that reputations would take a hit. Public filings meant public names. The hardest part wasn't the money, it was the shame. You could feel it in the pauses, in the way everyone chose words carefully. Shame makes smart people act stupid. It makes them stay quiet when they should speak. So we treated shame like a hazard. We built around it. Private folder, defined roles, clear documentation standards. Near the end, Eamon leaned back and said, "He's not brave. He's counting on silence." That sentence locked something in place for me. Blaine's real weapon wasn't charm. It was isolation. I closed my laptop after the call ended, stood up from the table, and walked upstairs toward Corinne's closed bedroom door. I didn't knock on Corinne's door the night before. I went to bed in the guest room and left her to whatever version of the future she was texting about. The next morning, right after 9, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the driveway camera. Blaine had arrived a full day early. His SUV looked freshly detailed, sunlight bouncing off the hood like it was part of the performance. Cardboard boxes were stacked neatly in the back, labeled in black marker. This wasn't romance, just a land grab dressed as confidence. I didn't rush. I checked every camera angle from my phone, made sure recording was active, then hit record on my own device for backup. I sent my mother a quick text. "Stay near your phone this morning." She replied within seconds. "I'm here. Keep your voice steady." The doorbell rang. I let it ring twice before I opened the front door. Blaine stood there smiling like we were about to finalize a merger. Corinne stepped out behind him, chin lifted, posture perfect. She looked like a queen presenting her new king to the street. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Dottie with her little dog again. The Winslows were in their driveway, pretending to reorganize tools. Witnesses were already in position. "Merritt, let's keep this respectful," Blaine said, voice soft and measured. That tone wasn't kindness, it was control wrapped in manners. "I intend to," I replied evenly. I stepped back just enough to reach the entry table. I set my phone down and tapped speaker. My voice stayed flat. "My friends are on the line." There was a brief pause. Then Tamsin spoke first. Full name, professional tone. She stated the amount she paid, the 6-month range, and the exact phrasing he used about discretion. Keeley followed with dates and the misuse of her showroom images. Leora cited the promises about medical protocols and industry contacts. Eamon listed wire amounts and the billing entities tied to them. No one speculated. No one shouted. They delivered facts like invoices. I watched Blaine's face shift in small steps. First confusion, then irritation, then calculation. He blinked more often. Corinne's smile stiffened, like it had been painted on, and was starting to crack. Tamsin said complaints were already drafted and ready for filing with the state consumer office and tax authorities. Keeley stated she had archived his entire online presence with timestamps. Leora said she would notify professional boards about unlicensed health guidance. Eamon added, calm as ever, that he had begun tracing accounts connected to the billing names. Blaine tried to cut in. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, still smiling. "You're all emotional right now." His tone sharpened on the word emotional. Even from where I stood, I saw Dottie tilt her head. The neighbors could hear the shift. He wasn't soothing, he was managing. When he realized I wasn't going to swing at him or shove him or give him a scene he could use, he changed tactics. He stepped slightly closer to Corinne and raised his voice. "Corinne, he's unstable. You need to call someone. This is not safe." Everything in me wanted to react, but I didn't. I kept my eyes on him and said clearly, "Everything is recorded. Choose your next sentence carefully." The porch went quiet, and I held my ground in the doorway. The porch stayed quiet after my warning, and I let that silence stretch. Then I stepped just inside the doorway, still blocking it with my body, and opened a folder on my phone. County records, trust documents, the boring proof nobody reads when life feels easy. I held the screen up at chest height. Corinne can't evict me from a house she doesn't own, I said evenly, and neither can you. I turned the phone toward her so she could see the trust name in black and white. She blinked, like the words were in another language. For weeks she'd been walking around telling people the house was hers now, like marriage was a magic spell that rewrote deeds and signatures. Years earlier, my mother had insisted on structuring the purchase through the Cole family trust. Cole was my father's side, and the paperwork was cleaner that way. I was the trustee. Corinne had no authority to transfer, pledge, refinance, or gift the property. On paper, she had zero leverage. Blaine had been trying to move into a wall. His mouth tightened. I could see him recalculating, adjusting some mental blueprint, or he pictured himself stepping into my driveway like a replacement part. That future depended on my front door opening. Corinne started talking fast. "You hid that from me," she said. "You've always hidden things. This is exactly why I needed help seeing clearly." "You signed the documents at closing," I replied. "You just never read them." Her cheeks flushed. The neighbors were close enough to hear tone, if not every word. Then, Keeley's voice came through the speaker, calm but sharper than before. "There's something else you should know," she said. "I found a draft brand agreement in one of Blaine's shared drives. It's titled Family Wellness Foundation. Corinne is listed as an officer." The air shifted. Corinne went quiet. Not confused quiet, caught quiet. I felt it land in my chest. She wasn't just dazzled by him, she was negotiating. She wanted a cut, a title, a clean story she could pitch to donors about starting fresh and leading something meaningful. Tamsin spoke next, steady and professional. "Corinne, do you understand that signing documents to funnel money could move you from embarrassed spouse to participant?" Corinne forced a laugh that didn't carry. "This is being twisted," she said. "You don't understand the vision." Blaine jumped in quickly, trying to drag the conversation back to feelings. "I have messages that could ruin people," he said. "Private things. Be careful how far you push this." Eamon's voice stayed flat. "Threats create additional documentation. Please continue if you'd like." That line hit harder than yelling ever could. I glanced toward the sidewalk. Dottie wasn't pretending anymore. She was openly watching. The Winslows had stopped moving altogether. This wasn't my humiliation. It was unraveling into something else. Blaine bent and picked up one of the boxes from his SUV, like he still believed momentum could carry him forward. He took a step toward the doorway. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move aside. "You are not coming inside," I said. For the first time since he arrived, Blaine didn't look confident. He looked trapped. Blaine set the box back down slowly, like he needed both hands free to think. Then he turned, muttered something to Corinne I couldn't hear, and walked back to his SUV. He drove off without slamming a door. That told me he was already planning the next move. By that afternoon, Corinne had switched strategies. She stopped trying to look triumphant and started telling people I was unstable. She told 2 neighbors she feared for her safety. The word unsafe started floating around like pollen. I didn't argue with rumors. I answered with footage and timestamps. Tamsin called me that evening and said, "This is where people like him get dangerous, not with fists, with narratives. Expect a protective order attempt, a workplace call, or a concerned friend knocking on your door." She wasn't guessing. The following morning, my employer's HR department received an anonymous tip claiming I was harassing a wellness professional and creating a hostile domestic situation. Compliance departments hate mess. Blaine was betting I would back down to protect my job. Instead, I reported it myself before it could grow teeth. I walked into my supervisor's office and said, "There is an attempted fraud matter involving my spouse and an outside individual. Documentation exists. Counsel is involved. There has been no retaliation." I kept it dry and procedural, no drama, just facts. I sent follow-up emails with attached timelines. When you speak compliance language inside a compliance building, people listen. Leora reached out privately the same day. She told me Blaine had been name-dropping a local donor tied to Corinne's charity world. That donor had his own habits he preferred to keep out of headlines, and law enforcement attention made him nervous. Not long after, that donor's office contacted Tamsin to resolve this quietly. Tamsin told me later she ended the call in 2 sentences. "We do not negotiate through third parties. Any further contact will be documented." Then she hung up and logged the interaction. Quiet deals are how schemes survive. We were done being quiet. Meanwhile, Eamon kept digging. He traced repeated payments routed through template limited liability companies tied to one name, Orrin Slade. On paper, Orrin was a business structuring consultant operating out of the South. In reality, he appeared to sell gray box playbooks to self-branded coaches who wanted to look legitimate without building anything real. Keely went further. She compared website code from Blaine's page to other coach sites and found identical formatting, recycled testimonials, and the same case study language swapped with different names. It looked less like a loan operator and more like a franchise, just uglier and sloppier. Then came another crack in the story. A mutual friend pulled me aside at the grocery store and said, awkward and embarrassed, Corinne thought Blaine was her way out. She believed the foundation would protect her lifestyle. That hurt more than the affair angle. She wasn't chasing love. She was chasing continuity. By Sunday night, a new name appeared in our group chat. Inez Salazar, a medical sales representative, furious and shaking on video. She said she had given Blaine money for a future he promised her, and she had messages to prove it. The blast radius just got wider, and I leaned forward in my chair to read every word she sent. After Inez sent her screenshots, the whole thing stopped feeling like a neighborhood scandal and started feeling like a case file. The divorce was no longer a porch threat thrown for effect. It became a process with deadlines, disclosures, and sworn statements. Tamsin referred me to a colleague who specialized in divorces where money had been used to fund deception and side deals. In our first meeting, he said, "We are not chasing emotion. We are tracing funds." That was the right language. I moved into the guest room that week. Not because Corinne deserved comfort or space, but because I wanted distance and clean boundaries. Every conversation after that happened by text or email. Short sentences, no editorial comments, everything saved. The first filings went out quickly. Consumer complaints, tax referrals where applicable, professional reports to boards when credentials had been misrepresented. Nobody padded the story. Nobody added drama. Every submission included attachments, timestamps, and source notes. That is what made it impossible to smooth over with charm. According to Inez, Blaine tried to bargain with Corinne when the pressure increased. He offered to fix it if she stood by him publicly and framed the complaints as bitter attacks. Inez forwarded screenshots of his messages. When the heat turned up, he treated Corinne like any other asset, useful until costly. Within weeks, Corinne lost her position on a charity board she had bragged about for years. It wasn't because people suddenly developed strong moral compasses. Donors hate exposure, and her name had become a liability. She called me one night from the other end of the house and said, "They stabbed me in the back." "They protected themselves," I replied, and ended the call. The settlement discussions were almost anticlimactic. The house remained with the trust, period. Joint accounts were divided with adjustments reflecting the money Corinne had redirected during her foundation planning. Numbers lined up with documentation. There was nothing theatrical left to argue. Meanwhile, Eamon's tracing work pulled more names into view. Orrin Slade's template structures became a separate thread investigators cared about. What started as one polished manipulator now looked like a supply chain with interchangeable parts. Dottie, of all people, became unexpectedly important. She gave a statement describing the porch confrontation, Blaine's early arrival with boxes, and his raised voice when he tried to label me unsafe. Small details matter when someone attempts to rewrite history. Corinne made one last attempt to reshape the narrative online. She posted vague lines about survival and starting over. Keely archived every post within minutes. When Corinne realized screenshots existed, she deleted them, but deletion does not erase documentation. By the time the divorce became final, there was no dramatic closing scene. I walked out of my attorney's office with a thin folder and steady hands, then drove home and unlocked my front door. I closed the front door behind me that afternoon and stood in the quiet house, feeling the weight shift back where it belonged. Within about 11 months of that porch day, what satisfied me wasn't watching Corinne scramble to explain herself. It was watching the entire scheme collapse in a way that couldn't be rebuilt with fresh charm and new victims. Blaine didn't fall because of one explosive confrontation. He fell because of alignment. Dates matched. Invoices matched. Social posts matched travel records. Bank transfers matched shell entities. Witness notes matched camera footage. 5 people refused to stay isolated, and that consistency boxed him in tighter than any shouting ever could. Tamsin told me later that he tried shopping quiet settlements to several of us separately. He offered partial refunds and vague apologies in exchange for silence. He hoped one person would blink, take the money, and fracture the group. Nobody did. We had already agreed there would be no side exits, no private deals that left the next victim exposed. Eamon updated us when investigators started asking detailed questions about limited liability company templates. The moment those questions surfaced, Oren Slade began distancing himself publicly. According to Eamon, that reaction told him everything. People who panic at structure questions have seen them before, he said during one of our calls. That kind of pattern does not start with one client. Corinne moved into a smaller rental across town and told people it was temporary while she reorganized her life. Dottie, who had once pretended not to watch, shared that update freely on morning walks. The same street that witnessed my public eviction attempt also witnessed her downgrade in real time. I did not need to say a word. I kept my job, but I changed the way I live. I no longer ignore small inconsistencies to keep the peace. I do not allow anyone to treat paperwork as optional when emotions get loud. Calm is useful only when it is paired with records. The strangest good thing was the group that formed out of this mess. We met in person a few times at a quiet restaurant halfway between our towns. We were not best friends. We were adults who had seen the same manipulation pattern and refused to pretend it was personal weakness. One weekend, my mother visited. She walked slowly through the house, touching door frames and window trim like she was checking beams after a storm. She looked at me and said, "Still standing." That was her version of pride. My revenge was not a new relationship or a loud victory speech. It was restoring my name, keeping my home, and forcing the truth into daylight where it could work without theatrics. When I think about that Thursday on the porch, I remember my own steady voice more than Corinne's volume. They wanted a spectacle. I gave them documentation, and I locked the door behind me. Do you think staying calm and documenting everything is stronger than going loud? If you've got the hype feature, tap it to support this video and help it reach more people. Hit like, subscribe for more real stories, and tell me in the comments what you would have done.